I'm Robert Ford, and this is an excerpt from my novel, The Dead Pennies, from Cemetery Dance Publications. 1964. You are expected to be prompt and do the duties assigned to you. Dr. Ray Dobson had shaken Cora Jean's hand and made eye contact when he introduced himself and hadn't looked at her since. His attention was on a clipboard he held in front of him, flipping pages and pausing occasionally to read. He was tall and lean, hair combed back from his face, which was home to dark, narrow eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses. Dr. Dobson acted like a man who needed to be somewhere else, but Cora Jean couldn't decide whether his behavior was from being incredibly busy with other duties or because he was simply annoyed with what was in front of him. He paused with papers in his hand, and she noticed a thick ring on his finger, gold with a large faux ruby set in place, the kind of ring she'd seen some military men wear. You'll be paid every Thursday. If you're able, I allow 2 15-minute... He curled another paper over the top of the clipboard. Breaks. One at 9:30 and another at 3 o'clock. A half-hour lunch is... He put the papers back in place and met her eyes again as he gave her a slight shrug. Whenever you can make it. He tapped his ring on the desk in the lobby, and a woman sat behind the desk looked up from paperwork as Dr. Dobson continued to speak. Diane, make sure Cora Jean signs all the IRS forms by tomorrow at the latest. Diane nodded and went back to jotting notes on her papers. He pointed down a corridor behind Cora Jean, and she turned to look. Any questions? My office is at the end of the hall, down there on the left. I hope you have a good first day. The doctor was walking at a brisk pace down the hallway when Diane called out, Dr. Dobson, where is she assigned? He stopped walking and turned back slowly. C3, Mrs. Myers. They could use the help. Diane glanced at her, and as the footsteps of the man reached down the hallway, Cora Jean noticed the worried expression on the woman's face. When the sound of an office door closing carried back to them, Diane put her pen down on the desk and leaned back in her chair. How old are you? 17. Cora Jean felt on display, inspected. Diane crossed her arms. Couldn't get a job at the Tasty Freeze or the roller skating rink? Cora Jean shuffled in place and flicked her tongue over dry lips. My mama, I need a full-time job is all. Diane's expression softened, and she broke eye contact, staring at her desk. She nodded and sighed, pushed her wheeled office chair away from the desk, and stood up. All right, then. Come with me. She walked from behind the desk, heading toward a wide, impressive flight of stairs leading upward. Elevator's broken. Hell, it's been broken for a couple of months now, and my guess is it'll be a while before it gets fixed, so you'll be getting your exercise. She slid her hand along the thick wooden stair railing as she climbed. The two of them reached the first landing on the stairs, and Cora Jean paused at the sound of crying behind a set of double doors. This is C2, the corridor where the youngest stay. Diane pulled one of the doors open and watched Cora Jean through the entrance. It was the smell that hit her first, the humid odor of urine and feces that reminded her of the goat barn at the county fair. She wrinkled her nose, and Diane nodded without speaking. The left side of the hallway had a row of windows revealing a room beyond, and Cora Jean stared at what lay before her. 2 nurses moved inside, walking the rows with clipboards in hand and checking things off. A large room was filled with a grid of bassinets. Small, pale bodies moved in some of them and were still in others. Bare arms and legs, pale and twisted like driftwood, misshapen faces, cleft palates. From newborns swaddled in cheap blankets to what appeared to be several toddlers, their legs drawn and curled against their bodies to fit in the bassinets. Stains of brown and yellow smudged the cloth diapers. A sharp wail pierced the air, and Cora Jean flinched. The 2 nurses inside the room were unfazed and continued on with their clipboards. Cora Jean's stomach shifted inside, and a sick heat flowed through her. It's a lot to take in, I know. Diane crossed her arms and peered through the windows. One of the women looked up and gave Diane a little wave, which she returned. 2 nurses, Cora Jean thought. 2 nurses to take care of about 60 children. Come on, it's time to get you to Miss Myers. Diane headed back for the double doors and the stairs, and Cora Jean followed her onto the landing. Look, Cora. Diane paused, turning her head slightly as if she was listening for sounds downstairs, but it was quiet. This place can be difficult. Things here take a while to get used to, and maybe they're things you shouldn't get used to. Maybe nobody should. I can do it, Cora Jean replied, though her voice sounded shaky and weak. Diane's gaze remained on her for a moment longer. C3 is what most people here call the cakewalk. She pointed at the double doors they'd walked through. That's a nursery, no matter how you look at it. Feed and change diapers. Diane pointed above them. The cakewalk is something else entirely. Why do they call... From the flight of stairs above them, sounds of people yelling broke the silence, and Diane broke into a run up the stairs with Cora Jean behind her. Reaching the set of doors, Diane grabbed a handle and flung it open. Grab her goddamn arm! It was a woman's voice, and as Diane rushed in, Cora Jean took several steps and stopped at the sight. A young girl thrashed on the floor, screamed through vocal cords of broken glass. The noises were an animal in agony, shrieking anger and fear and pain. Her head twisted from the tangle of blonde, shoulder-length hair, and Cora Jean saw her mouth and chin were bloody. Hold her, Carl! The yelling woman was crouched, holding the left wrist of the girl in one hand and trying to put her knee on the girl's stomach. The man she was referring to was kneeling on the opposite side of the girl, and as Diane reached them, the man gripped the wrist of the girl's flailing right arm. She kicked out with 2 knobby-kneed legs, almost catching Diane in the ankle, but the woman dodged the kick and dropped to the floor. With both hands, Diane grabbed the girl's kneecap and pressed it to the floor. The girl bucked her hips, and as she thrashed out, almost kicked Carl in the face. She stretched her neck, trying to get her mouth on her hands, and he twisted away, wrenching her elbow joint. Another piercing scream burst from the girl's throat. The nurse snapped her head up at Cora Jean. Get over here and help! Hold her goddamn leg down! Cora Jean broke free of her paralysis and bolted toward the other 3 people. She moved back from the girl's kicking leg and then pounced down, grabbing the girl in a protruding kneecap and laying down on it, pinning her to the floor. The man produced a syringe from somewhere, and Cora Jean watched as he jabbed it into the girl's upper arm and pressed the plunger. Almost immediately, the girl's head lolled back toward the dull tile floor, and the sounds emanating from her throat dropped to a soft whine. Her arms and legs stopped thrashing, and then she was still against the floor. Cora released her arm and stood up first, followed by Diane and then the other woman. Cora Jean was the last one to let go, and adrenaline coursed through her veins, making her feel like a live electrical wire as she stood up on her feet again. That little bitch. Cora Jean turned to the sound of the voice and saw a woman walk out of a small room to her left. Her face was blanched of color, but tight and constrained, holding back rage. I am fucking done. The woman held her left arm, wrapped in sheets of brown paper towels, out away from her body. Red blossoms bled through the paper. The woman spoke in a low, even but angry tone. I'm going to the infirmary to get this patched up, and then I'm walking the fuck out of here. Anna, the woman turned with a glare and then headed out the double doors, leaving a liquid trail of burnt cherry droplets in her wake. Shit. The nurse whispered under her breath and snorted, shook her head in disgust, and then turned to Carl. Put her on a gurney and strap her ass down, wrists and ankle cuffs. The man walked into a room with an open door to his right, emerging seconds later, pushing a hospital gurney in front of him. The nurse released a heavy exhale and walked toward a desk near the double doors. She slid into the chair behind it and lifted a phone receiver from its cradle. A thin wooden plaque sat on the desk that read Miss Myers. Diane caught Cora Jean's attention, and then she looked down at the girl on the floor, splayed out and unconscious. She stared at the girl for a few moments and turned to Cora Jean again, mouthed the words, "Good luck today." And with that, Diane walked past her and through the double doors. The sound of her receding footsteps faded as the doors closed. "That's correct." Miss Myers nodded at the voice in the other end of the phone. "This is the third—" "Yes, exactly." She slid a clipboard on the desktop in front of her. "All right, then. Thank you, Doctor." She hung up the receiver and her gaze landed on Carl. And as he finished strapping the girl's wrists to the gurney, "Carl, Dobson's orders. Third time's a charm for her. Today was the last." The man gave a silent, curt nod, buckled the girl's ankles into thick leather cuffs secured to the gurney's metal frame, and pushed it toward the rear of the large room. Cora Jean watched as he paused to open a door, and then wheeled the gurney inside, closing the door behind him. What's going to... You work this job on this floor. You have to react quickly. Miss Myers leveled her gaze at Cora Jean and stood from the desk chair. "I know it's your first day, and it's a lot." She walked from around her desk to stand in front of it. "From now on, if I or anyone else yells at you to help, you do it, and you do it immediately. Around here, hesitating gets people hurt, or worse." Cora Jean felt that flush of heat through her veins again. "They're children." "Uh-huh. Children who don't know any better." Miss Myers' expression grew stern. She pointed to the doorway Carl and the girl had gone through. "That girl, that child, she attacked a nurse a few months ago. Less than a week on the job, and that child used the metal clip of a pen to peel that woman's face off in less time than it takes to brew a cup of coffee." Cora Jean's stomach twisted into a wet knot of rope. "Don't turn your back on them. Don't ever let your guard down." Miss Myers nodded toward the trail of blood drops leading toward the double doors. "Use nicknames instead of their real names. It helps." A soft whimpering sound came from beyond the doorway of the room. Carl had taken the girl. Miss Myers didn't even so much as glance in the direction. "Don't get attached to them, and don't dare let them get attached to you." "Attached?" Cora Jean silently scolded herself for how weak her voice sounded. "You don't really want them to like you. If they do, you'll be the sole focus of their attention. And trust me when I tell you." Miss Myers took a step closer, and her strict tone eased, if only slightly. "That's the last thing in the world you want to happen." So, there's an excerpt from my new novel, The Dead Pennies, out from Cemetery Dance Publications, and it's available everywhere. Thank you.